Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Technically Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Megan, with John, as usual, and today we have a special guest, Deirdre. Welcome to Technically Speaking.
Hi.
So, just to begin, would you like to give everyone just a brief description of your background, your history, whatever you'd like to touch on about yourself?
Hi. So I've been in any form of training roles for the last 14 years, coming from the military to fitness to healthcare to higher ed. And I've been doing instructional design and strategy for the last about 7 years now. I have a master's in instructional design and technology, and I'm actually currently a PhD candidate in business psychology. So a little different than e-learning, but it's kind of, I'm starting to see where corporate is needing to add it to the business side. But yeah, so I have a very wide background as far as learning goes, from corporate to e-learning to.
Well, you said military. So I'm a Navy vet. My first question is going to dig in a little bit there. I'd love to know more of what you kind of did during your time.
So I was in the Army. I was in the 101st. What I did was computers, radio, technology. So I did anything signal related. So a lot of IT while we were in the United States. And I ended up having to do a lot of training material for that.
Yeah.
And because training in the military is not necessarily, especially when it comes to documenting how to do like a lot of technical stuff, could be better. So creating that for a lot of leadership. Yeah. So it's, that's kind of where it started, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't even realize that like adults, there's training that because I love teaching adults.
And military training is so different than corporate, what a great foundation to start kind of cutting your teeth on, where you get to work within such a structured organization and environment. I love the Army.
Right.
Close
yes.
To the Navy.
Right. It is. It was a great foundational piece, and having me realize that this really is a niche for training adults, because we never stop learning. And that's one of the biggest things in the military is there's always training. You can always be learning something new or improving what you already know.
Yeah.
Kind of just following off of that, can you tell us just a little bit about what it is that an e-learning architect does?
Yes. So an e-learning architect, a lot of it is project managing a lot of different, because there's a lot of balls in the air that you have to catch. And a lot of it is the multimedia part from IT. And then you have the content from subject matter experts and making sure that is tightly put together. Then you have your LMS administration to make sure that it actually, when you put a course in, it's not going to break. So it's overarching a lot of things. And then also being a consultant to subject matter experts who know their subject really well, but not necessarily teaching itself. So a lot of what we do is helping people become better teachers. And it's basically, we're interpreters for information. And as an architect too, the analogy I like to use is you're building a house, and you are creating the plans to build a house, and you have a builder, and then you have your electrician, and you have your plumber, and they do all these jobs, the very specific jobs, but you make sure that all the plans are done in this house so that at the very end, you have this beautiful finished product. But it takes a lot of people who are specialized in different areas to be able to do that.
And I'm sure one of the challenges you face, we work in tech, and we have a ton of SMEs, that are brilliant at what they do. But how challenging is it sometimes to pull that information out in such a way that you're able to formulate like comprehensive training? Do you find that to be one of the harder parts of the job?
Yes, it can be difficult. And where it gets difficult is sometimes I think they're overthinking the process, and they're just thinking about so many things that you want to get them just focused on the information. And you kind of have to break it down to them that I just need what's in your brain, and just tell me how you do this job. How do you do it? And once you get them in that conversation, it really helps them be able to then put it down. I'm like, what you just said, put it down on paper. Oh, that's what you want. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, we've worked, creating training sessions for like the applications we build, that has always been one of the things that I struggle with. It's that, but I love the nugget you just gave, which is really just to make it more of a conversation and have them talk and then highlight where they're hitting it so they can know where to go back to it. So thank you for that nugget.
Okay. So how do you think technology is changing the way students learn and teachers teach?
Especially for students, what's happening, I'm seeing, is that they're getting access that they normally wouldn't have had. So a lot of, especially students who've had a geographical or a socioeconomic disparity previously, are now having the same access as students who've had it before. It's also creating this wonderful inclusion and equity as well. So students who've had disabilities and students who have a language barrier. So ESL, your English to second language students. Now there's a lot of translation services that are able to translate that and take courses and understand what's happening because, it's translated form. Yeah. And we can't expect our instructors or our teachers to be able to translate that. And so being able to have this technology has been wonderful. Having a library at your fingertips and the resources has just been great. And then on the teacher side, they are getting this data analytics that normally has not been available to them. So they can see where students are struggling and provide extra support if they're needing it because the data is telling them, hey, your student is struggling in this area. Let's provide more support here. So you're seeing more data and science-based instead of, I feel like this should happen. No, you are using evidence-based to create better teachers. And teachers are then also can show that, the data is telling me that students are needing more support in this area. And sometimes you can have outliers with certain students that are needing support or they're doing really well. But then you can also get an average. So if all the students are not suffering, but if they're all struggling in certain areas, okay, this is where the teacher can improve here. So I think it's giving them great timely feedback versus administrators or their provost or the dean of a school isn't able to go into the classroom to watch them. So a lot of this is going to give that teacher the feedback.
Well, what I love about that as well, it's, when my mom was a teacher, 30 plus years ago, the principal would come in once a quarter, maybe, and then, students are never really sharing anything negative, except, so this is a great way for them to iterate faster. And that's one of the things that I love about, the openness of technology is really just allowing people to see things at a quicker, faster snapshot and then make those improvements. So I'm glad to hear that translate in the classroom.
Yeah, and it's objective, not subjective. Right. So it's just fact. So computers they don't have a feeling about you, that they don't like you or dislike you. It is pure fact that this is what's happening. And
the feelings are coming though. Just wait. Yeah. Once computers start feeling, we're in trouble.
Right. Oh, it's so funny is that Microsoft apparently has been, when they've been training about AI, is they said when you put in for their Copilot, typing in for AI stuff, they said use please and thank you while you're doing it as well.
100%. I always do that because I feel like the robots are all listening and sharing information. So any kind of large language model that I use, I'm always like, good morning. How are you? How's your day? And then it always says, John, I'm just a computer. But I'm like, someday you won't be.
Someday you won't be.
So just kind of piggybacking off of that, obviously technology has a lot of pros, but there's also a very negative connotation around it as well, to where what's the borderline of where it's distracting and where it's beneficial. How do you avoid this from becoming a distraction, do you think?
So I've seen that with in corporate and just the very consulting and working with different organizations, is they want a lot of flashy things. They want the simulations, they want the videos, but it's really important that we stay with the foundations. That's not going to change. We need to understand the root cause of a problem or the root need for the engagement with students. So why do we need this? So it's really important to go back to the most fundamental part of agile methods, the pedagogy of learning, and make sure that we have our objectives in the beginning, because that's going to be our clear path. So there is a clothing company, and they were trying to figure out a way to teach their employees. They were having an issue with their products they weren't going missing, but there was an issue with when they were pulling the financials that there's missing money. like why is there missing money? And it turns out that there was product mislabeled or things like that. Okay. So they're like, well, the cashiers need training.
Yeah.
We need product training. What they wanted was like an interaction where the employees were learning how to use the technology that they were having, but it was really important to understand what the actual problem was. So one, always engage the learner as part of building education because they're the ones taking the course. So it's really important to get their feedback. And it turns out that it wasn't necessarily that money was missing. It was that they didn't quite know what a product was in the system and it was mislabeled. So we went back and they fixed the labeling and the money showed up. So it wasn't necessarily an education issue. It was an operational issue. Yeah. So it's also really important to identify that early on. The distraction comes in, especially if you're in a virtual way, it's when there's too much going on. So I like to use a lot of really cool, iterative, like AI stuff, like videos, and a mixed variety of them. But it can get overwhelming pretty quickly. So it's really important to have just a little bit here and there. It doesn't need to be overwhelming.
How do you decide how much interactivity to build in? Is it kind of age group dependent? Like, do you really just like research the audience to try to make those decisions as to, the types of training? Because there's a lot of different ways you can train folks. Like, so what's sort of your thought process when you're deciding whether to make it highly interactive with tons of video, or maybe something for like engineers in our world, it would be very text-based, linear, straight down and fill them out and go. Like, what's your thought process there?
So a lot of it's individual. So everything, especially with how I build, it's very custom. So from one company to another, even company culture could be different. And then people are different. So working in higher ed, so how I approach people that are in healthcare, they learn a different way. Nurses learn a very different way than you're going to have a computer coder or an engineer. They learn different pathways. It really will depend on that. But a lot of times, interaction comes in with also what is the ultimate assignment. So if it's something especially if it's computer based, a lot of how-to videos, because they can see actually virtually what they're doing, is really great. It really just depends on the situation. Yeah, a lot of times, and it's also really important to listen instead of just you're listening, because a lot of times what they're asking for isn't necessarily what they need. They're asking for something without realizing what their actual need is. And I've had people like, I really want more how-to videos. I really want these really animated videos. Yep. And then it turns out like an issue that comes up a lot, especially in the corporate world, is high turnover rate. And companies, and it's funny, I've worked from some Fortune 500 companies, I've done consulting for them. And across the board, I'm like, I'm not going to name names, but all of you seem to have the same problem. And you really don't have a problem. Here's actually, it's really funny, is that they think their house is on fire, and it's not. But like higher turnover rate. I was like, well, here are some science tells you this is why, but let's look closer into your company and seeing what the issue here is. Is it onboarding? How you properly onboard someone? And then you're taking onboarding and then going, okay, maybe we need to do more mentorship with your managers. So they take more of an individual approach versus, just sending them videos, it's 9 hours worth of videos, which
it's kind of a loaded question. I'm sorry, Meg, I'm asking one more, but you're talking a lot about the importance of that prep and research. What % of the project do you think is sort of that prep and research versus actually building the curriculum? Like, how much do you invest in the upfront to make the back end easier? And
you probably spend, it depends, but a lot of times you're always going to spend more time up front. And the reason why you spend more time up front preparing to do the production part of it is because you're going to waste time if you get down to a project and you're already halfway through, built this beautiful, amazing course. You get halfway through and then more information comes in. Oh, wow, we need to backtrack. So you just wasted, like, say you're on a project for 3-4 months. You now have to go back 3-4 months that you just wasted. So it's called technical waste. And that's what you're trying to avoid. And so I will spend more time preparing and asking questions and doing that before we actually come up with the plan, because it's really important to fully understand the problem, because sometimes your customers, they see the symptoms of what is happening, and may not be the problem. They see the signs and symptoms, but they're not actually addressing the problem because they may not know that that's what the problem is, because they're just seeing high turnover rate. They're just seeing that they're losing money in a particular area. They're seeing high dropout rates with students, but they're not knowing why. So that's really important to address that.
So how do you stay updated with the latest e-learning tools and innovations in the market?
A lot of that is me. I'm part of quite a few instructional design and e-learning groups on LinkedIn. There's also a couple of other forums that I'm a part of. Interesting enough, Reddit is a great forum, and it's so vast, but like people will pop in and put in things that they're working on, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Let me look at that. But yeah, a lot of forums. And people will put in like what they've been working on and just show like samples and just kind of get feedback. With technology that's a huge one, is really kind of word of mouth, even though it seems archaic considering how much technology we have, but really ends up being word of mouth from other colleagues. And then, so other instructional designers, other people in the same industry, just kind of giving each other.
That's great that it's so collaborative, and I bet having Reddit didn't exist 20 years ago. So it's great that we have these online forums where you can now hear from people all around the world, let alone the country, where I think maybe 20 years ago it was hyper regional. You might be able to drive from Columbus to Cleveland and talk to folks. What's some of that? What I guess my follow-up question would be like, out of all the nuggets you got off of Reddit, which is an amazing platform, do any stick out as sort of the kind of the big wow as like a win from using Reddit?
It was funny is that I think there was recently a disagreement on the role of an instructional designer and the back and forth on that. But I think a huge part is kind of articulating how to like approach instructors and teachers and how we can help them is a huge one, and kind of explaining what we do, because it's instructional design and e-learning architects. You're the jack of all trades. You have to know just about everything in it. So it's really hard to explain to someone in like an elevator pitch, a 30-second elevator pitch of what you do. And just kind of, and probably one of the best descriptions I got from Reddit was saying, we're like interpreters. We're like the ghostwriters of teaching. We're the people behind the educators, and just whispering.
I love it.
Okay, so just a final question from me. How do you see the landscape of e-learning evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
So I think that we have a lot of technology, and people address that as far as the future of the next 5 to 10 years. But underneath, if you peel back all the layers underneath all of that, is really creating an experience. Because basically that's what life is a series of moments, makes up a whole life. And I think that education is not separate from our life, but it needs to be infused into our life. And that's how we're getting into VR and gamification, because we're now we talk about theory all day long, but how do we put theory into practice? And that's where the e-learning tech and all the different technology is coming through, is that. And we want to infuse it into our life, because we're lifelong learners. We never stop learning. I think I learned how to make tortillas on TikTok the other day. Yeah. And, it's amazing.
How easy. Yeah. I was surprised at how easy making tortillas are. I was like, oh, I can do that.
I know. I thought it was hard. It turns out it's not. But like an older woman, I think she was an older woman, a Hispanic woman, that's in their tradition, was teaching me how to, I was like, this is amazing. Yeah. And if I didn't have that video, there was no way for me to even learn that. So I think I think that's where we're going. And then also e-learning has been such an isolating experience. In the next 5 to 10, it's been more collaborative. It's been more immersive. And I think because it can get lonely when you're learning by yourself, and creating that classroom and that community within e-learning is just going to be revolutionary, and just being able to share ideas and cultures. And it's becoming more global. And I think that's where it's going to go. And it's been wonderful to see that, and it's great to see that people who aren't necessarily tech or been wanting tech has now kind of been asking for it without even asking for it. And it's great to see that bridge being gapped.
You mentioned VR. My son recently bought himself an Oculus, which means I get to play with it. He's gracious enough to let me play with his Oculus. So I'm new to the VR space, but What are some of the ways you see that being utilized from a training standpoint? Specifically, is it you noticing it more maybe in commercial training or more in like education, like a K-12 or higher ed training?
Kind of both.
Okay.
So in corporate, it's allowing for trainers to not have to travel all over the United States or from region to region, depending on the company size. And then also, instead of just watching videos, training videos, you can actually have them live and talk to your classmates. I've seen VR where like you're sitting next to your classmates in a class, and it looks really cool. And then it can communicate with each other. So that's been a really cool thing on that side. But then also on the higher ed as well is, some projects I'm working on, it'll take about 5 to 10 years to even make great. But students who are in a healthcare program, and nurses and physicians can actually virtually go through and see a heart pumping. And before they even touch a patient, which is the most ideal situation because, we don't want to work on live patients. We want to make sure that they are, but they need to be able to see what's going inside the body. And virtual, and sometimes when you take off the virtual, you have to like sit down for a minute and because it can disorient you really well. And you do got to sit down, but it can really be great to actually see a human body and see surgery live and just be more interactive that way. And we're creating, and this is what I tell instructors when we're building education, no matter what field that these students are in, these are the students that are going to be taking care of us in 20 years, 30 years. Yeah. It's really important that we teach them well, because these doctors and nurses they're going to take care of us. So if you want to be selfish about education, that's how you be selfish is train them well. So because they're going to have to take care of you.
And I agree with that sitting down. I cannot stand up in the virtual world. My son laughs at me that I'm always like, I'm sitting down and then I set my stationary boundary and he's like, Dad. I'm like, hey, I'm 47, man. Just give me a break. So sort of the last question, it kind of ties in nicely. But we like to always ask our guests to sort of end it to really come up with a bold prediction about where your industry is going to be 10 years from now. And we covered a few of the things that already, but is there something you'd like, hey, we're in 2024, I'm going to plant my flag and I'm going to review this in 2034. Here's where I think, the industry will be in 10 years.
Bold stance. Okay. Bold. So I think,
let's go. Bold.
I think especially education, we're going to be a lot more global. I think we're going to be, and we're going to be able to talk to each other regardless of language and it be translated automatically to us. Yeah. And if you have impairments, visual impairments, you're going to have closed captioning on the bottom in a virtual world. So we're going to be able to you can take a class with somebody in Germany and India, and you could all be in the same classroom and understand each other. And regardless of whatever limitations that you've had before, you're going to be able to see it. People colorblind will be able to take the class as well and not have that disparity. There's a lot of technology that's coming into play for people who have not been able to have access before. Even people that live in our own country that live on a ranch or a farm who are 2 hours away from a school. Now they're a part of this community and they have a wealth of knowledge that they can bring into. So it's just that shared information as well.
Oh, that is such a great answer. And I am excited to have you back on in 10 years, hopefully before then as well, to watch all that come to fruition. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Megan, for hosting. Everyone following us at home and watching today, if you have any questions for us or for Deirdre, please send them over to technicallyspeakingexpeed@gmail.com and we'll make sure to route them the right direction. And that's going to be it for today. We're going to wrap today's episode. Appreciate your time today. And for everyone watching at home, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you next time.